Europe is the world's wealthiest continent with universal healthcare and advanced infrastructure. By July 5, 2026, more than 5,600 excess deaths had been reported across the continent from heat. But the heatwave was never one disaster. It was two, the same weather moving east, finding different cities, different buildings, different bodies along an older economic fault line. And the line was invisible until the heat exposed it. This is the forensic story of that line. On May 26, 2026, the United Kingdom recorded its hottest May day in history, 35.1 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens in London. The previous May record, 32.8 degrees, had stood since 1922. A Met Office attribution study found that breaking that old record is now approximately 3 times more likely due to climate change. What was a once-in-a-century event in a natural climate is now roughly a 1-in-33-year event. The UK Health Security Agency issued its first Amber Heat Health Alert of 2026 in late May, warning of a rise in deaths particularly among the elderly during the hottest times of day. Records are not just numbers in a logbook. They are signals to hospitals, care homes, and power grids. In the UK, that signal arrived before summer had officially begun. The early heat was not a headline, it was a structural warning. It told emergency planners that the summer would not follow the old rules. The same mass of hot air that broke the May record was not going to stay still. Before the June peak, the human cost was already visible. A 53-year-old runner suffered a fatal heart attack during a race in Paris's 20th arrondissement in May, amid temperatures of 32 degrees Celsius. The same weekend, a woman died of heatstroke during a sports competition in Lyon. Neither event was in a remote heatwave hotspot. These were organized public events in modern French cities. Then, on 23 June, Météo France declared it the country's hottest day since measurements began in 1947. Temperatures reached 44.3 degrees in Pissos and a June record of 40.9 degrees in Paris. The heat was not discriminating by wealth or fitness, it was testing the body directly. The body can adapt to many things, but only if it gets the chance to cool down. The deaths were the first data points of a pattern. The same temperature, applied to different bodies, does not produce the same outcome. Paris is one of the richest cities in the world. Its asphalt, stone, and dense rooftops held the heat long after sunset. The heat did not stay in Paris. The World Meteorological Organization stated on June 26, 2026 that the heatwave would affect Western, Central and Southern Europe over the following 2 weeks, with the focus likely to shift towards the Balkans. That forecast turned the heat into a moving front. Austria sat directly in its path. Its June heatwave lasted 14 days. New local temperature records were set at 60 of 251 long-term monitoring stations, and an additional 88 stations set new June temperature records. In Vienna's Ottakring district, the nighttime temperature did not drop below 27.3 degrees Celsius on June 29, the highest June overnight minimum since Austrian record-keeping began. The danger was no longer just the peak. It was the lack of recovery. When night fails to cool, the body and the building start the next day already exhausted. And this failure did not happen uniformly, it followed the borders of building codes and cooling access. The same heat was now moving toward places with older buildings and thinner cooling options. But the infrastructure on the ground was not changing as fast as the forecast. Here is the hidden variable. The UK's Climate Change Committee reported that more than half of UK homes are currently at risk of overheating. Engineering firm Arup projected that figure will rise to 92% by 2050. The committee warned that over a fifth of housing stock will need air conditioning when global warming hits 2 degrees Celsius. This is not a report about a poor region, it is a report about one of the wealthiest economies on the continent. Much of Europe's housing was built to hold heat, not to shed it. Thick walls, sealed windows, dark roofs, designed for cold winters, became traps in a heat wave. When the night does not cool, the building becomes a fever. The line between surviving and dying was not drawn by the thermometer alone, it was drawn by insulation, ventilation, and the ability to cool down. And that line has a geography, running through the same continent that thought it had solved vulnerability. Cooling is not a luxury when the temperature inside the home does not drop. It is a survival system. Austria's second nationwide heatwave of 2026 began on July 29. On July 31, Wieselberg reached 40.3 degrees Celsius, a new national July record, surpassing the 1983 record of 39.7 degrees. By late July, only 3 of Austria's 2,114 municipalities had not experienced at least one day at or above 30 degrees Celsius in 2026. Several municipalities had experienced more than 30 such heat days. Then, on August 5, Austria recorded its highest temperature in recorded history, 41.2 degrees in Bad Deutsch-Altenburg, breaking the previous national record of 40.5 degrees set in 2013. The heat was no longer an event. It was a condition. The records were falling faster than the infrastructure could be retrofitted. Each new record was not just a statistic, it was another day that buildings, hospitals, and bodies had to survive without the cooling margin that older climates had allowed. The second wave arrived after weeks of accumulated strain. That made it different from a spike. It was a hammer hitting a structure that had already absorbed the first blow. By August 10, the Elbe, Rhine and Danube rivers were experiencing severe drought and record shallowness. The concern was not only water supply. The conditions raised concerns that rivers could become too hot and shallow for nuclear power stations to use for cooling in future years. The heat had moved from air to body to building to river. The systems that make Europe wealthy, electricity, water, hospitals, were now being forced into the same narrow thermal margin. A nuclear plant does not care about a single hot day. It cares about the temperature of the water it depends on. When the rivers dropped, the heat stopped being a weather story and became an infrastructure story. The disaster was not only about temperature. It was about threshold. Every system has a threshold, and the thresholds were not aligned with national borders. A river does not recognize the line between one country and another, but the cooling capacity does. By July 5, over 5,600 excess deaths had already been reported across Europe. World Weather Attribution later concluded that the 2026 European heatwave was the most severe ever recorded over the region studied, and that it was virtually impossible to explain its intensity without accounting for climate change. The heat did not kill evenly. It moved east along the shadow of an older border, finding the same weather on one side and different buildings, different cooling, different outcomes on the other. The question is no longer whether Europe can afford to adapt. It is where the retrofit and cooling money goes next, into the walls, wards and grid lines of the places the next heatwave will hit first. Because the next heatwave is not a hypothetical. It is already on the way.